Hey, good morning, everyone. Going live here in a moment with my friend and client Anne Marie. We're talking about what you resist persists and how sometimes the thing that you want to run away from might be the very thing that will get you to where you want to go. My name's Alana Davidson. I'm the creator of Essence Coaching and the author of Finding Your Unhappy, A Soul Searcher's Guide to Peace and Happiness in Everyday Life. And we're just working out the technology here. Trying to bring Anne Marie on here. Anne Marie, it says I cannot add you. Oh, there you go. Let me see here. Add as guest. Here we go. Here in just a moment. So if you haven't heard about my book, I wrote my book for people who have been struggling or maybe have been for a long time and done a lot of things to, hey Anne-Marie, welcome to our call. So maybe if you're a soul searcher, you've done a lot of personal practice, maybe different healing stuff, and you wonder why you're still not all that happy. It seems like there must be something missing because you haven't quite gotten to that place of happiness should be possible. Part of my journey was being a soul searcher, looking for those answers and struggling for pretty much more than 20 years. I had bouts of depression. I struggled with depression, and I wondered, what am I missing? That there must be something missing here because I've done so much work on myself, so much work on my stuff, and yet I'm still, there's a gap between where I know I should be and could be and where I am. And so this book is, if that's true for you, this book is for you, for getting to that place where you really are connected with yourself, with your happiness, with your well-being. And just wanted to invite Anne Marie on the call. Anne Marie and I have known each other for going on, oh gosh, I can't even remember, 7 years.
Because Carson's 7, so it must be 7.
7 years since her little boy was a little baby, and we've worked together in various capacities, and we're here today to talk a little bit about that work and about some of the insights on the journey and the experiences on the journey. Anne Marie, do you want to introduce yourself in any other way?
Well, I do want to just mention your book is kind of an epic tool here, especially because I have done the work with you on and off throughout the past 7 years. And to read it in print and to be able to like reflect back and read through it again is a really valuable tool. And as far as like targeting who the book is for, you nailed it. Craig was helping me to read some of it too. And he's like, she's talking about you, and as I was continuing to read it, I'm reading things that I know aren't my story, but they sound just like my story.
Mm-hmm.
Even some of the experiences were very similar that other people were having. And it just kind of validated that it was the right resource for me, which is
awesome.
good. Because throughout like traditional therapies, you might question your own sanity.
Right. Such a great reflection for me. And also just want to offer anybody who's listening, tuning in, if you haven't gotten a copy of my book and you would like to check it out, you would like to get it, I'm giving it away to this audience for free as a download. So you can visit yourhappyguide.com, and you can access a free copy of my book. I'll also put the link in below once we're done with our little conversation here. So
thank you.
Yeah. So here we are talking about the book, talking about what is sometimes actually required or missing to get to that different place in your life. And when I was chatting with Anne Marie about having this conversation, she was talking about how she finds it so hilarious that sometimes like the very thing that she's like, I don't want to talk about, I don't want to do that, actually turns out to be the very thing that will help. In my book, I talk about the keys to unlocking yourself from your experience, from depression, that kind of thing. And so one of the keys sometimes is the things that you're running away from might actually be the things that are going to open up more possibility for you. So Anne Marie, do you want to say a little bit about that?
Well, I mean, this time I said, I don't want to talk about my relationship to Craig. I don't want to talk about my personal life. I just want to focus on business. Of course, that's not how it happened. And I have to chuckle because throughout the years, now looking back throughout the years, I would say, whatever it is, I don't want to talk about the past. I just want to focus on the future. And you'd be like, oh, okay. Are you Anne Marie here and now? And I'd be like, no. You know, before we even did the muscle testing, I knew the answer was no, that my inner child needed to be validated, or I was
Yeah,
having some sort of empathetic feeling for another person. It wasn't even my own being. And
yeah.
you weren't overly correcting. You were just kind of, okay, are
Okay,
you?
let's
You?
look at that. Oh yeah, and that is so, that's so great. So often it's like what we think we want to focus on. There's like these other layers. And I had a similar experience, except for it was switched where, well, no, yeah, it was let's see, it was very similar. Like I would go to my person who does similar work, and I would say like, oh, I really want to focus on growing my business, developing my business. And I wasn't in a relationship, but almost every single session that I would do would come back to relationship. And so it's so interesting sometimes how these things are interconnected. And
Mm-hmm.
also, just as you were alluding to and mentioning, how sometimes, so if you go to traditional therapy, you're going to be like, I want to talk on this. And your therapy's going to be like, okay, let's look at that. Let's talk about that. Let's figure out what's going on there. And
Right.
sometimes that works. But when you feel like you're not really getting where you want to go, or you've spent a lot of time in therapy and you're like, I'm not really seeing the changes I would like, sometimes it's because there are these under layers, the other things that actually need to be looked at.
Right.
And as you know, in this work, we use the tool of kinesiology, which is to work with your body, work with your physiology almost, to help us guide us where you really need to look at.
Right.
And like
The muscles don't lie when you do the muscle testing. You know, like a therapist could say, okay, Emery, let's talk about your future if that's what you want to talk about. And, you know, my muscles let us know that that's not what needs to be addressed. In order for me to achieve what I want in the future, we needed to validate all of
the
the
little
stuff
girl,
that
or
I'm
the,
running away from.
yeah, and oh yeah, I just love it. And that's one of the things that I love about the work with the kinesiology, is that, and also as a practitioner. So in therapy, in traditional therapy, you tell your therapist what you want to work on. They say, okay, they give you some ideas. And it's so often, in my experience, can be manipulated either by me, like as a client, right? As a client, like something scary comes up, and almost subconsciously, I'm like, no, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to talk about it. My therapist has no idea that that's what I'm avoiding. And the
Right.
and then similarly, sometimes I'm sitting in therapy and my therapist is suggesting things or pushing me in a direction that I'm going like, this doesn't feel right for me. This doesn't feel true for me. And it sets up this funny dynamic, because the therapist is supposed to know like what to do and what to talk about, and I'm going, that doesn't feel right. So like, but they're supposed to be the authority. So how do I manage this? And
Right.
with work as a practitioner, if I have a hunch and you're like, no, I don't think that's it, I'm like, okay, cool. Or we'll
Exactly.
muscle test and we'll say, okay, what really is it? And so it adds this third element that's not so dependent on you knowing what you need to work on, or me as the practitioner like having the wisdom or the insight. It's like we facilitate the process together, which is part of what I
Right.
really love about the work. And
Especially though, if someone's really good at manipulating themselves away from the work they're trying to avoid. I mean, it was the only thing that was going to empower me through that process. So
right,
I'm
do you
happy
want
that
to
we
say,
found each other.
yeah, you want to say a little bit more about like maybe some of the things that you've avoided that then you've gotten to look at in a new way? And
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I mean, with this round, I was avoiding talking about my relationship to Craig, who we love, but I wanted to focus on me. It was all about me, but I needed to understand the parts of me that are trying to connect with other people and the relationships that I have. And of course, he's my primary relationship in everything. Even in the business, he's like the biggest support probably. Um, And like, then it's not even just my relationships to people or to him, but then my relationship to money. I remember that was really powerful. You said, if money was your lover, would you still be having sex? And I was like, no, I don't treat money very well. So,
Right.
it was all about relationships. That was the work I needed to do right now. Even though when we started, I was like, absolutely nothing to do with relationships. I just want to focus on business. I want to focus on showing up fearlessly. But I needed to,
Right. And
the
it's
work
so
guided me back to
good.
that.
You're like, I don't want to go there. And yet the work and the process took you to the
Right.
very thing that was going to open up that space for you, because
Mm-hmm.
so much of what our energy is all interconnected. So how you show up in relationship is connected to how you show up in business. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, to try to compartmentalize our lives doesn't actually really work, because it's all interconnected. And this tool of kinesiology, sometimes I'm like so surprised how you start with one thing over here and you're going over here and you're not sure how they're going to connect, and then they weave back together and it's like, oh yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And you see
It
the
makes
connection.
total sense at the end.
I mean, I think about some of the work we did with like your little girl, and how that
Mm-hmm.
was completely like, who would have thought that like losing your dad and having these experiences from childhood would be showing up in like how you're running your business.
Yeah. So then I
And
went from relationships with Craig to relationships with the business, relationships with money, to my own relationship with myself, which involved my inner child work as well as my dual personalities, which was totally fun. And I brag about this all the time, that Anne Marie holds these beliefs and then Ammy has these beliefs. And sometimes I don't realize that they are not getting along in here. And you were so kind as to help facilitate a conversation between the two parts of my identity that both needed validation, but were very much just like polar magnetism. I don't
yeah,
even.
and that's so much of this work, I think, also that's missed in so many of the other things that I've done and that I've tried in my life, is that there's layers that are outside of our conscious awareness or at the subconscious level that really are what are affecting our behavior. So whether it's your inner little girl who's upset with you and like throwing a fit and trying to run the show, or it's these different aspects of yourself and your personality that are in conflict. So one person is trying to assert themselves saying, no, like you just have to have fun and enjoy yourself. And then there's this other responsible part of yourself that's saying like, we need to buckle down to work. And they're sort of fighting inside of yourself, let's just say. And
Yeah.
and often we don't even know that. We just know that there's something about our lives that's not working very well, or it feels hard, or we're in conflict. And yet, when we can drop down and connect with and communicate with those pieces that are below the surface, subconscious layers of what's really going on for us, wow, like
Yeah.
for me, that it's like the way that I describe it in the book, it's like getting the key to the treasure chest of yourself. And
Mm-hmm.
I felt like kind of locked out of that reality before. And then when I got the tools that allowed me to see what's really in here, let me open the chest here. It was like, wow, so much different understanding and depth of awareness about myself.
And that was like the mental part. And now I'm realizing I started to get a little itchy, because when I think about sharing emotional stuff, I break out in hives because my whole body is trying to resist it. So like I'm gonna probably get a little hives right here. But then there's the emotional piece too. You're trying to hide from these emotions because a lot of times they're painful, sad, aggressive. But
Mm-hmm.
almost every time that I've really looked in and validated the emotion, it has become less strong. Like, it has
Mm-hmm.
processed through my experience so much more quickly.
Oh, yeah. And that fits so much with this theme of what you resist persists. Like when you run away from your emotions or you try to stuff your feelings and say,
Mm-hmm.
like, go away, I don't want to look at you, it maybe you break out in hives, or it becomes stronger because it's. And another thing that I talk about in the book is that all of our experiences are information that we can use. And if we just learn how to understand it and interpret it, then it can be useful for us. So an emotion is information. It's here to tell you something. It's trying to get your attention. If you resist it and push it away, it's going to speak louder to you. It's going to try
Mm-hmm.
to get your attention more. Whereas when you can just acknowledge it and say, hey, what's here, it can shift, it can change, it can lessen and lighten up. It's so great that you're having that experience, because that's been so true for me too. Is like when I stop fighting it and making it wrong and telling it to go away, and I say, hey, what are you here to tell me? then then there's a shift. I've heard it said that no feeling actually lasts for more than 90 seconds. And if you just be present with whatever feeling is showing up for you,
I
that
bet
there
that's true. Yeah.
within it in 90 seconds it will shift for you. And there's this quote that I love that I put in my book. It's from a person I studied nonviolent communication with, which I think is how I first met you, actually, was at a
Yes.
communication workshop. But and he says, your feelings are not up for negotiation. And I just love that, because I used to fight with and argue with how I was feeling so much. Like, I shouldn't be feeling this way. I'm overreacting. Like, I basically I shouldn't feel the way that I feel, or like these feelings are unjustified. And his point of view, and that I've really owned and taken on, is your feelings are not up for negotiation. They are the lived experience of the moment that you're in. It's
Mm.
like if your finger hurts, you don't say like, my finger shouldn't be hurting. Why are you hurting? Like what's it's like, no, it's hurting. Okay, let's figure out what to do about it. If your heart hurts, it's hurting. And to try to say, oh, my heart shouldn't hurt, or I feel sad, I shouldn't feel sad, why am I feeling so sad? It's like, no, that's just your natural response to something happening in your life.
Uh,
It's
yeah.
information. And then you can learn how to work with that information. You can learn to understand what that feeling is telling you about your experience. But that has been so valuable for me, to start to actually listen to my experience rather than tell it to go away and that it's wrong and bad. So
That brought up a memory for me. Recently, my daughter, I had a baby about a year ago, and she was not going to come home with me when I was leaving the hospital, and it was very, very emotional. I was not prepared for that at all. Um, and the nurses were talking to me about my mental emotional well-being, and they asked if I had a history of depression. I said it was all very situational. It was a natural reaction to the experience I was having. I wouldn't label myself a depressed person. It was all part of the environment that I was in. And I wonder, how often that's accurate for people who might be resisting what they're feeling, because
yes,
it's a
yes.
lot easier to try and figure out, a pill or a different type of solution than allowing yourself to feel those very difficult
Yes,
feelings.
and
I ugly
that's so
cried a lot
interesting.
this year, and so
I've been
beautiful.
editing my book a little bit for the print version, and I was just on a chapter where I talk a lot about that. And in my book, I talk a lot about, so if you've struggled with depression, or, you know, wondering why you can't be all that happy, one of the things that took me years to figure out is that there were places that I hadn't allowed myself to have emotionally appropriate responses to what had happened to me, either historically or currently. And that suppressing that feeling and like not being willing to look at, not being willing to see it, made me depressed. And one of those feelings was anger. Anger is a feeling that most of us try to avoid, especially women are told like doesn't have an appropriate place. And also I had been told repeatedly, gotten the message from my family repeatedly, that like, no, what I experienced was not true or whatever. But finally accessing those feelings, so like you're talking about, and it can be any feeling. It could be the sadness, it could be the joy that you weren't allowed to have. And that like when you put the lid on yourself, so to speak, and restrict the free flow of energy. For me, feelings are just life energy moving through you. And when you restrict them and you put like this tight lid on yourself around it, then the natural response is to be depressed. And then also what you're talking about too, I find so true as well, that sometimes life brings us circumstances that are challenging. So when I talk about happiness, I don't mean having a smile on your face every single day of your life and being joyful every single day of your life, because that is not always the most emotionally appropriate response to have to life. If someone in your family, my father passed away in November, and so there was natural grieving that came with that. That's an emotionally appropriate response to a loss, to that kind of experience. But the happiness is this sense of being in the flow of life, being connected to life, being connected to my okayness as a human being, versus sort of like the unhappiness that I struggled with for a long time, is feeling really twisted up, sometimes feeling crazy, wondering if I was going insane, having these experiences I didn't know what to do with, feeling depressed and not understanding why. And once I've been able to really work with my experiences, work with my emotional life, it just, there's a flow to it. And like, I still cry, I still get sad, but it doesn't bog me down in the same way. And it's like, I'm okay with it because I know it's part of this journey, and I'm like connected to myself and connected to the flow of life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, how many years were you struggling with depression? Because we've known each other for 7 years. And I don't think either one of us ever used the word suicide or depression during our encounters, but it's a very true thing that was affecting both of us.
yeah.
I
So, and
mean, how
that's
long has
another
it
thing
been a
that,
lifelong journey here?
yeah, and so truly, I probably started I mean, it's hard to pinpoint, but I think back and I know that like at 11 or 12, I was thinking, like, what is the point of life and why am I really here? And definitely throughout my teenage years, there was feelings of not wanting to live and intense depression. And then into, so yeah, during the time that I've known you, I've gone through those experiences, and I was still struggling with understanding. I would get into places of suicidal level feeling depression and not understand what it was and not understand how to work with it. And it's in the last, I would say, 5 or 6 years. I talk about this in the book. My book is not particularly about overcoming depression, although there's a lot of things that will really help. And I do talk about one turning point in there where, since then, if those feelings ever start to creep back in, I know exactly what to do to shift them. And so it's been a big pivot. So yeah, it's interesting for it. Like, I guess I didn't actually know that about you. It doesn't surprise me, but I didn't have that information. And so that's so true of so many. How many of you out there have struggled with these kinds of things, struggled with, you're a conscious person that's, seeking a better life, seeking to be happy, seeking to share your light with the world, and yet inside you're grappling with these really dark, hard things. And I know for people that haven't been super close to me in my life are really surprised to find out, and people have known me like my whole life are surprised to find out that I've had such a challenge with my emotional life and such a challenge with my mental health. And I really want to open up the conversation and create more space to talk about the things that we struggle with, because that's part of getting answers and getting useful tools, is that it's so stigmatized. And when I would talk about wanting to die, it would freak people out in my life. And so then
Mm-hmm.
it was harder to talk about, and it was harder to have support around it. And I wasn't finding good tools, and I wasn't finding good information that really helped me understand my experiences, which is partly why I wrote this book. Is like, this is some of the information that nobody else was telling me that I needed. And I went to lots of different people and worked with lots of different healers. And there was things that other people just weren't giving me that I needed, that finally have made the difference for me. And I wonder, Anne Marie, if you want to speak a little bit about your own journey with some of those things.
Um, well, I give you a lot of credit because I've been totally ignorant through a lot of it. Like, we'll have our sessions, maybe it was like 2 to 4 times a year, we would catch up and have sessions. And almost inevitably, every single time, we'd start out with a muscle test. Am I Amory here now? And I wasn't. It was always a weak muscle test. It was a no. And it gets so twisted, for me at least, it would get so twisted with where in my past I was, what part of my inner child we were working with, or which of my family members or friends I was trying to like perceive, therefore empathetically connecting with. And it got so twisted that sometimes our sessions were longer than they should have been, because it was just a lot of muscle testing to figure out what was even going on. I didn't have the words, I didn't have the knowledge, because I was constantly resisting all of it. I was running away from it. Even the word empath, I can't call myself an empath right now. I can't do it. But that's because I'm resisting it. And I get that.
Yeah.
And I don't want it, but it's a thing that happens for a very valid reason. And just coming into a place of acceptance is always a lot quicker than perpetually resisting what the universe, the divine, your God is giving you to work through. I mean, this all has purpose, and this is where faith is very beneficial, regardless of what your faith is, to just have faith and like push through whatever it is. Not with your blinders on. You used that in the book too. Imagine putting blinders on and then being surprised at all the things you missed because
I'm not seeing you, I'm not hearing you, everything's fine. Yeah,
that was
absolutely.
totally me.
And if anybody's watching and they have a question or they want to just make a comment, we'll be happy to respond if you want to say anything or comment on anything. And yeah, and what you're saying,
he's going to recommend this book to a friend. I'm excited about the hard copies. Like, I want to have a few available.
Yeah, so that will probably be out this spring. Again, if you would like to read this lovely book that I have hanging here on the wall, you can get a free copy, yourhappyguide.com, and that will take you right to you'll get an email with a download, and then you can just start reading, and then if you have questions, then we can be engaged further with that. And I wanted to touch on something that you were just talking about, which I think is so true for so many of the clients that I work with, is that there's so much that they don't understand about what's going on for them, or like, why they're feeling suicidal or feeling twisted. I use the term twisted up because I don't know how else to really talk about it, but just like this inner, like, conflictual, twisted up place inside of yourself that you don't know how to resolve. You don't really understand what's going on. You're not even really aware of it. And that part of the work of the kinesiology and the self-inquiry is to start to get to what's really going on and unraveling, like, oh, I had no idea that, this thing from my past was affecting me, or that I'm subconsciously trying to resolve issues with my mom, or I'm taking on the energy of somebody else and I'm carrying them with me. And these are so many of the layers that I think are missing in so much of the other spiritual approaches, the other personal healing modalities, is that we're not getting to what's really going on under the surface, and we're not recognizing how much we might be perceiving from other people and other people's realities that is impacting and affecting us. And so those are some big things that I really try to cover in the book, and that really made the difference for me, is to get those pieces. So
I like that you saved the chapter about entities. I forget all of the subcategories of it, but you saved that till the end.
And chakras, and maybe there's something, in your body, including your body. Yeah, so
there's like a lot of people who are going to be resistant to that right off the bat. Like, they don't want to believe in any of that, and you validate that right away. You're like, that's fine if you don't want to believe in it. But if you do want to acknowledge that maybe doing this work as if, you could pretend it's an entity affecting you, does help you process through and heal from what's you're suffering, what you're afflicting with. It's a great way of allowing a safe space for people to explore that, really. Yeah, regardless of whether or not you believe
there's a lot of dimensions that we can look at and that we can work with. And my point of view is you don't have to actually believe any of this. So one of the things that has been incredibly transformative for me especially recently, is working with my past lives. And I've just had a lot coming up, and it's made huge shifts in my life. And now I say, like, I don't really know 100% did I live other lifetimes, and yet to work with that information is hugely transformative for me in a way that nothing else, like, nothing else makes sense for what I'm experiencing. And when I get these uncover and transform things from other lifetimes, it's like all of this energy opens up for me. So my invitation to you, if you're exploring this kind of, you meaning the larger you, whoever's watching this, is like, does it create a shift or change for you in your life? And that's my target always. And my target working with clients is not finding the right answer or getting the right information. It's really like, what is going to open up more space for you? What is going to change your experience with whatever you're struggling with? What feels lighter to you? And so if it shifts or changes something, like, that's what I care about. You know, I don't care how it works, really. I don't care what's actually really true. Does it make your life better? Does it improve the quality of your life? Does it help you function better as a human being? And if so, I go with it. And that's my truth monitor for myself. It's like, it's true for me because it's creating ease and space in my life that I didn't have before. And that's what my goal is. So you don't have to believe in past lives, but if you work with the imagery that comes up with them, and all of a sudden you like feel like, wow, I came back to life, I feel so much better, cool. You can just say, oh, it was just like whatever, that imagery helped me out, or whatever it is.
Yeah, you don't need to explain it beyond that or validate it, because you're not trying to convince anybody else that you believe it to be true or not. You're just allowing it to facilitate your own healing. And I really like that, because the minute you try to convince someone else of your beliefs, it's almost as if you're taking away from your own personal empowerment, because now you're seeking their validation instead of like holding your own empowerment.
Exactly. And that's just it. And I'm going to wrap it up soon because we've been talking for already a half an hour, which is amazing. And just want to say that that's so much, I think, also what sets this kind of inquiry and work apart from, let's say, therapy or some of the other things, is like, it's all about, I don't have the answers. I'm just helping you find what's true for you and what's going to work for you and what's going to help you. And that, and again, also for me, like, working with a practitioner, I'll say, no, that doesn't work for me. And it's like, no problem there. I don't have to like invalidate my therapist and say you're wrong. It's just like, what's true for you, and turning it back to the person that I'm working with. Does that change your experience? Does that relate for you? Can you find where in your experience that's true for you? Because really my goal is to empower you to know what you know, and to be able to facilitate yourself, to be able to have the tools and have the skills to understand your own system, to understand all the informational input that you're getting, and how to work with it, and how to be masterful in working with your own being and your own self. And then from there, it's, you know, then you have more capacity also to help others. And so I love it, and I love this model of empowerment and helping you. Like, I know in the recent, Anne Marie was just in my recent program that I put together for my book, and part of it is doing the inquiry work. So I'm helping facilitate, but also a big part of it is teaching some of the tools that I use for that. So the people in the program then have the tools that they can use on themselves. And it's like, they can internalize it and do it themselves, which I'm so excited about offering in my work, is how to use the tools yourself and to internalize it and get it yourself. So it's not just me doing it for you, then you know how to do it for yourself, and you can get better and better at it. And there are
That's great. I would have been willing to pay you for years and years and years to come. Yeah. Well, and I will. I still will.
And here's the thing. You can get better and better at using the tools yourself. You learn the tools and you get better at them. And then, like, I've been doing this work since 2004 is when I started. And I still come to things that it's like, my teacher calls it being in the soup. you can't see yourself clearly. You don't know what's going on. You're twisted up, and it's hard to self-reflect. You need someone who's outside of it to give you the input. And so I do still have sessions with other practitioners, and I still do work with them. And I talk about that at the end of the book, is that sometimes you're going to need help from someone else, and that's perfectly fine. It's part of the journey, it's part of the process that you might need some assistance. So I know we could go on, and there's so much to talk about, and maybe we'll have a chance to have another conversation. But thank you so much for joining me here and exploring this work together. It's just been a pleasure to work with you and a pleasure to see you grow and step more and more into your true being and your true light. And the light is shining on your face beautifully right now, so that's perfect. But yeah, it's just lovely also to be like a companion on the journey, and to be able to be a mentor to you, but also a colleague to you at the same time, which I also love and is not always possible in certain healing modalities. So that's something I also love. And if you would like to get a copy of my book, just say it again. If you're just tuning in at the tail end, you can go to yourhappyguide.com, where you can get a free copy of Finding Your Own Happy. And darn it, there was one more thing I wanted to say, and I forgot what it was. Oh yes.
Next time.
I will be posting this video. So I will be posting this video in the event What You Resist Persists. So you'll get a copy, and I will be creating a comment below with the link. And Anne-Marie is in the Poughkeepsie, Hudson Valley of New York area. She has a beautiful spa called the Inner Light Health Spa. If you're at all in her region, I highly recommend checking it out. They even have a sauna now, great massages, facials. Do you want to say a little bit more about the work that you do? Belly dancing. Oh, you're belly dancing, which I think is so exciting. So for your audience or anybody out there watching from the Hudson Valley of New York, please go check out the work that Anne-Marie does, because she also is a magical healer and supporter of healing in her own right, bringing lots of different kinds of work together. So just delight to know her.
That's where my work is now, is just bringing it all together and holding space at Inner Light for people beautiful practitioners and teachers, instructors, to share their work with the community. So that's been just a really great adventure for me, and it's been personally healing as well. But lots of wellness workshops, lots of movement classes. I recently realized just how much I'm pushing my body to do dancing, and in particular partner dancing, because in a partner dance I need to submit to the leader, which is really great because I've put myself in so many other leadership roles within my business, with my children. So I'm constantly just connecting the body, mind, emotional circuit through various techniques. So
super. Well, thank you so much. And if you've enjoyed this conversation and you're interested in tuning into more conversations, I have a conversation once a week with someone about topics on finding your own happy. You can visit my Facebook page, which is facebook.com/empathic gifts. I post all of the events there, so you can find any of my upcoming events where I'll be having similar conversations, and possibly in the future another one with Anne-Marie. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Anne-Marie, so much for your time and your lovely light, and we'll be in touch. Take care, everyone. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.